Hey everyone, Louis V here from Vinyl Latte, and today we're going to be talking about the world's largest record store. I had an opportunity to go and visit the location myself in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I also scored some records which I mailed home. So we're going to go through those records and talk about the store, so stick around. Okay, welcome back, folks. We're going to talk about the world's largest record store, and before we get into the box of records that I collected, I just want to talk a little bit about the place itself, give you a little bit of history about the location, and also share with you some of my experiences as I walk through. So the location we're talking about today is Banana Records. They're based in St. Petersburg, Florida. They were founded in 1977 and by a husband and wife couple that actually had a bookstore. They used to sell books, and one of the couples, I can't remember if it was the wife or the husband, was a record collector or into records and wanted this Joan Baez album that was being offered in a collection. When they talked to the seller refused to sell the album separately from the collection, so they bought the entire collection for a single Joan Baez album, and it ended up selling the rest of the collection in their store. Well, vinyl did really well, and they slowly transformed into a record store and eventually phasing out the books and completely focusing on records at one period in time. They've been a growing record store since. They now house over, I think it's either 20,000 or 22,000 square feet of records. They're broken over a course of 3 different locations in the St. Petersburg area, all within a couple blocks from each other. You have the main storefront, and then a couple blocks down you have their warehouse, and then across the street from the warehouse you have their equipment store. So collectively they make up the world's largest record store, and that's actually how they advertise them as being such. I want to share with you my thoughts, and then we'll get into what I actually picked up at the store. So to give you a little bit of context, I was on holiday with my wife, and we were enjoying some time in Sarasota. And the last time I creeped through Sarasota and St. Pete's, I didn't have the opportunity to visit Banana Records. So it was a priority for me this time, and my wife knew it as well. She's like, you need to go to your record store. So I left her in downtown St. Pete's to enjoy some of the festivities that were going on, and I drove over to the record store, and I had about maybe 2 hours of free time before I had to get back to my family, trying to be respectful. So let me give you my thoughts going into it. If you've never been to Banana Records and you like going to a record store, I don't know if your impression of this we match here or not, but when I think about the world's largest record store, I'm thinking this place is going to be massive. I'm thinking it might be multiple levels. I'm thinking that it's going to have a lot of cool records on the wall, and then I'm going to get a lot of rare stuff that I can't just normally find because obviously being the world's largest record store, you probably acquire a lot of records. Now, did all of that meet my expectations? Well, let's walk through it. So when you approach the building, they have some parking in the back. Once you get situated, you kind of have to walk on the street and then somewhat the sidewalk to actually get into the door. It is what it is. But when you're approaching the building, there's tons of signs advertising that this is the world's largest record store. So this brings up your expectations. Now, I was almost super excited. Like, my anxiety was up, actually. I had like anxiety walking into the store because I didn't know how I was going to handle it, and I was worried that I might just completely blow my budget. Plus, I'm on vacation. How am I going to get all this done in 2 hours, et cetera, was all racing through my head as I pulled open the door. When I pulled open the door, surprisingly, it wasn't as large at first take than I imagined in my brain, but that's okay. I didn't know the layout. I didn't know if there was more passageways. I didn't know if there was a second level, a third level of records, so I was a little bit uncertain of the layout. But when you first walk in, it just looks like a large record store. I've definitely been in record stores that felt about the same size in the past. They have everything broken out in sections. When you first walk in, it's sort of their new arrivals and the latest things that's come in, whether they're new pressings, new releases, or newly acquired, pre-loved, pre-owned vinyl. I spent my time browsing those selections first, not anything that was newly released, of course, the new brought in vinyl. And I was quickly trying to get a grasp on how their grading score went. And then after I went through that collection, I then took a moment and just kind of walked around the store to kind of get a feel for the atmosphere, get a feel for how they're organized, get a feel for where do I want to go attack next. And a couple things I just want to kind of call out. When you walk in, if you go immediately to the left, you have some equipment for sale, some turntables for sale, and then some that are actually on display, I guess, so you can play test them. And that is in the same area as their listening space. And I thought this was a pretty cool space. There was plenty of couches for you to sit down. I actually sorted out some records there. And then against the wall, you have numerous, I think it was 4 turntables, if memory serves me right, that you could go and listen to any of the records that are pre-owned there, and hear them out. And they were decent turntables for being a listening pod. You put on a pair of headphones so you can really hear all the intimate details. I actually did check one of the records. I believe I remember which record that is, and I'll call it out when I unbox it and the reason why I checked it. But it was really cool in that sense. And then if you continue to scan around the room, you actually have some restrooms there, some cool artwork, and they have a refreshments cooler where they serve soda, water, and beer. So if you wanted to have a beer while you shop for records, so be it. I think what's really cool about that is that if my wife did come with me, if I could have brought her with me, she would have been able to lounge around because they have music playing and comfy couches. She could have had herself something to drink, whether it's water. If she wanted to have a beer, she could have, because I was driving. And then if she needed to use the restroom, she could. So I like that they have amenities there. I thought that was really cool. Of course, around the register, they have their holy moly wall where they have sort of their grails or rare pressings available for display for you to see behind a wall. And then you have all your music is kind of broken up in sections. You have your rock section, you have an R&B and soul section, you have a hip hop section, which the hip hop section was actually pretty cool because in the hip hop section, it felt like the hip hop vibe. Plus they actually had hip hop music playing in this quarter, which I thought was really, really cool, this section of the store. And then of course you have things like soundtracks and Latin and international and in reggae. There's a lot of different sections. Isolated via a door from all of the typical genres you have, they have almost this whole separate jazz section through a glass door. So you go into another room that looks like almost like a warehouse style room. And there you have several rows of jazz music, which also accompanies itself with another sit-down kind of lounge area. So if you wanted to sit down and either preview records or if you had your significant other with you that just wanted to kind of hang out, they could. And actually there was couples there that were hanging out at the time. There was also a little bit of a mini holy moly wall around the lounge area demonstrating some of the, I guess, key or select records in jazz. But overall, the store, I think, really caters to people who are shopping, but also caters to people who might be waiting, which I think is really cool. I like when stores do that. I like when stores offer things like refreshments. We have a couple stores here in Raleigh that do that, including even offering beer, which makes me feel better when I'm with a group of people or with a friend or with my wife. When we go to a record store, I don't feel like they're just waiting on me. They have an opportunity to relax, maybe have a drink and just kind of get lost in their phone or have a conversation with somebody or listen to some music. So that makes it a little bit better. My interpretations getting into it was that I think I had very high expectations. I had high hopes. I kept envisioning this record store being like the record store to go to, and I guess I compared it pretty high. Now I will say that I'm very fortunate that I have the opportunity to travel a lot, including internationally. And when I do travel, I tend to always hit a record store and wherever I'm at that time. So if I have a few days, I try to spend at least one of those days for a couple hours to go hit a record store before I return back home. So where I'm getting at is I have the opportunity to see a lot of different record stores, how they present themselves. You know, I get a sense of how general customer service works in some of these environments, etc. So let's just talk about overall just selection and impression. Overall, I felt a little bit like when I walked in the door, I swallowed because I didn't know how large this place really was. And I did see at the back corner of my eye a door that said, this door leads to 50,000 more records. So my first thought walking through the door is there is no way I'm going to be done in 2 hours. There's just no way. There's too much to go through here. And I'm quickly kind of going through my head on how I want to approach this because I'm not going to be able to browse through everything. That would take an entire day to do. Then my follow-up thought as I was walking around, kind of getting a lay of the land, was this is not as large as I originally thought it would be. And I think some of that is because of the warehouse. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, they have multiple locations which seems to be married underneath the single brand. They have a warehouse. Now, from my understanding, you as a shopper can go visit the warehouse and you can go shop the warehouse. So it's almost an extension of the store. And my understanding is that they rotate items from the store to the warehouse. So that's nice. If you live next to the store, you probably always have some fresh things coming in and out of the store, so you never get bored browsing the selection. And that is a problem if you frequent record stores often. You tend to get sometimes bored that nothing new has come in and you're hoping that they buy a new collection or hoping somebody trades something in good to give you some reasons to go back and do some browsing. I don't think that would ever be the case here in Banana Records. They tend to have a lot of records. When I started actually flip through some things and I started with those new pre-owned, pre-loved records, one of the things that it did strike me right away is that there was a little bit of grading inconsistency. There was several records that were marked either near mint or VG Plus that had noticeable abrasions on the record. I can kind of understand on a VG Plus side because having a mark on a record that's unaudible is still considered VG Plus, but on a near mint record, you're not expecting to see scuffs or marks on an actual record. So that made me start realizing that if I bought anything pre-owned here, I definitely need to make sure I check every single record, which I did, and I definitely walked away with a decent score. However, I probably put back about 5 records that I grabbed in total just because I felt like the grading really didn't match up to what I was buying. Pricing seems to be fair. I didn't feel like anything was gouging. Wasn't shocked by any of the prices, which sometimes I am. I've spoke about that in other videos, especially my last video where I published to you around my tour of different Florida record stores when I was traveling from Orlando to Sarasota to St. Pete. I shared with you that one of the stores seemed to be really hiking up their prices and taking advantage of people who just don't know any better. I'm not going to bring up their name right now, but if you want to know more about that, you could check out that video. I didn't feel that was the case with Banana Records. So that's good. I feel like they're priced fairly. I just wish that there was more consistency in the grading. With that said, when you look at their sort of holy moly wall, I guess I expected bigger and rarer titles. Most of the things that they had behind their wall were kind of common things you would typically see at a record store. Nothing really blew me away. I think, end up scoring 1 or 2 albums from the wall just because I've been looking for really good pressings of those and they did have them. But it wasn't anything that was like, wow, this is the thing I've been waiting for, looking for a long time. Like nothing really blew my mind to say. The other thing I would say that might come off negative is there's a lot of records to flip through and you can easily spend your entire day just at the store. Now, I didn't have a chance to go to warehouse. I only had 2 hours and I chose to go to the record store. So please excuse me as I can't talk to the warehouse. Maybe my experience would have been different if I would have visited a warehouse. I would have checked that out. I would have had maybe a different experience. But in the actual storefront, I felt like there was a lot of records there. But I don't know if you would say there were records that were interesting enough for me to say that I really wanted to pick them up. I remember going through rock starting with A and I'm just like flipping and flipping and flipping and flipping and nothing's really catching my eye of anything that was like a must have. So they have large quantity of stuff in the store, but the quality of the stuff I think is a little bit narrower in the store. And I don't mean that as a negative, right? When you have the world's largest collection, you're going to have what I would call fluff in a collection. And for some people that are just starting out their record collecting adventure, that's all they need. They're not looking for rare presents like I am. They're not looking for hard to find stuff. They're not looking for niche stuff. So for the average person, that's probably great for them because they can build up their collection quite quickly. There's a lot of great records, fairly priced. Just for me as a collector, as somebody who's looking for very specific stuff, I didn't feel like I found a lot there that would meet what I was looking for. So overall, I would give sort of the record store an average rating. I don't think I would go out of my way again to go to the record store the next time I'm in Sarasota, calling out the fact that I drove purposely from Sarasota to St. Pete's to go to the store, which is, I think, an hour and a half or nearly 2-hour drive from where we were with traffic. I don't think I would do that again. If I'm in Sarasota, I would just go hit probably Salty Dog, which is my favorite record store in Sarasota. And I feel like they, even though they're a much smaller store, they had a lot of really cool stuff and a lot of rare stuff that, quite frankly, I could have maxed out my credit card or drained my bank account, or whatever you want to say, buying records from there. So I think next time I'll just spend the time at the Salty Dog and skip Banana Records. However, if given the opportunity to be back in St. Pete's, I'd like to go to the warehouse and provide an update. I really feel I missed out. I feel like I missed out on the opportunity to go to the warehouse and check that side out because I feel like that's where I would have been blown away. And I'm hoping that if this is your record store, or if you've been to both the storefront and the warehouse, I'm really hoping you can shed some light, shed some information, grab some clarity around this in the comments below, because I tried to do some research online and there just wasn't much about online that I could find about the storefront versus the warehouse. So if you have some knowledge or insights, I'd love to hear about it. But again, overall, I feel like this was sort of an average record store for me. I do feel like I would go back if given the chance to be in Sarasota, or I'm sorry, in St. Pete's, but I wouldn't go out of my way for it. And I would go back just to kind of, make sure that my first impressions were spot on. I always like to give record stores more than one try, unless they're absolutely rude. Because sometimes you just overlook things, especially when you go in there with some time constraints. There might have been a whole section, or maybe there was some stairs that led upstairs to a whole nother area of browsing that I just completely missed. I don't know. But from when I tell in the videos that I'm sharing with you as speaking about this, I just felt like it was an okay record store. I did grab some things, but quite arguably, I sometimes have a much larger haul for my local record store than I did here, and that just wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting to go back to my wife, who was, I don't know, lounging on a beach, and with full apologies of, hey, we have to go home early because I just spent all of our money. I felt pretty safe there. I didn't feel like my wallet was at jeopardy at all. That's not saying I didn't get some cool things. So I tell you what, folks, let me go ahead and get this box open, and we'll go ahead and dive into these records together, and then we'll get this video wrapped up for you. Okay, guys, I pulled the box out of the shipping box, which came in as sort of protective cardboard protection, and we're about to dive into the records. So I'm going to show you each one by one, try to give you a little bit of information behind them, maybe a little story why I picked it up. So why don't we go ahead and just dive right into it, starting out with Digital Underground. This is the Songs of the P, their second album, blending funk, hip-hop, humor. A lot of influences here from George Clinton and Parliament. And this P-Funk sound is what the Sons of the P is supposed to stand for, is P-Funk, which is sort of taking sound and blending it into live instruments and sort of sample beats. Now, this is the first pressing of this album. It's in stereo. It's sealed. And this was one of the records that was in the Holy Moly wall. So I thought that was really cool. Is it a grail? It's not a grail. Is it a cool record or hard to find rare record, especially in a condition? Yes, that's why I grabbed it. Moving onwards to some rock here, we got kind of a cool album. This is Tommy the Who. Some of you folks really know and love this album. This is their fourth studio album. Groundbreaking rock opera album released in 1969. And it's primarily written by Pete Townsend, which sort of tells the story of a deaf, dumb, and blind boy who rises to fame as a pinball wizard. You probably know the song Pinball Wizard. This particular pressing is the Simply Vinyl. It's 180 gram audiophile pressing. It's supposed to sound really, really good. It's one of the reasons why I grabbed this particular one. So I'm excited to actually give this a spin. Probably one of the top, if I could get like the top 1 or 2 records that I grabbed, this is going to be one of them, because I'm excited to hear how this sounds. Okay, moving onward, we're going to move to Another Green World. This is Brian Eno, his 3rd solo album. This was a little bit of a landmark on Brian's career. He uses this innovative studio technique of blending synth and tape loops and unusual instruments to kind of create this unique sonic palette. This is electronic music, in case you're wondering. The particular pressing is a 2017 Euro press. It's a remastered reissue. It's supposed to sound good. That's one of the reasons why I picked it up. Now, moving forward, if you're a Beatles fan, you might like this one. It's not the Beatles, but it is John Lennon. This is the Plastic Ono Band. This was John's debut album. I think it was 1970 when this originally came out. And this is this is an emotional record. It's very raw. It reflects sort of John's, personal struggles, definitely departing from the Beatles sound. This is just, I don't know. It's one of the top albums of all time. What I liked about this one, and the reason I grabbed it, is that this is a 2021 worldwide reissue, but it features an additional 11 outtakes. So you have the full studio album, which has 11 tracks. Then you have an additional 11 outtakes, which are remixed from the original multi-track. So I thought this was a pretty cool one to pick up, and it's supposed to sound fairly well as well. So it felt like I couldn't go wrong with that score, and I'm interested to hear the outtakes. Okay, the next 2 were instant grabs for me, and I'll explain to you here in a moment why. But let's start out with the albums. This is Miles in Berlin. This was filmed in Berlin, Germany, obviously, and this is I think he was at the Philharmonie when this came out. Philharmonie, my apologies. And this was in September of 1965, I think. What's cool about this has some historic context behind it. What's cool about this, it is the first recording ever of the second great quintet, which became very influential in the genre at its time. It's also a document of kind of Miles transitioning from hard bop to this more modern avant-garde approach. Now, the reason this was an instant buy for me is that not only is it just a great press since 2017, it's near mint all the way around. It is a mono cut, but it is a Speaker's Corner album. And I feel like if you can find any album that's a Speaker's Corner album that's in good shape, pick it up, man, because you will never be disappointed. I've never been disappointed with any Speaker's Corner album ever. And that's why I grabbed this one. This is It's Monk's Time. Thelonious Monk. This is not as revolutionary as his previous work, but it does showcase his ability to sort of reinterpret jazz standards by still maintaining his own kind of originality. This is a 2021 reissue stereo. Again, Speaker's Corner. It was an instant grab for me. I'm looking forward to giving this a spin. I actually have quite a few Thelonious Monk albums. I don't have this particular one. So this was a nice addition to add, and I'm hoping this becomes like Speaker's Corner. I'm assuming is going to be definitive press. I'm not going to need to find a different one. Okay, moving on. I'm only going to flash this title or this cover with you because it can be sensitive for some of the viewers, and I really want to make sure that this channel maintains a family-friendly channel. So if you're sensitive at any level to imagery or graphics or anything like that, just close your eyes for just a second. I'll tell you when we're done. But this is the album I picked up. Okay, it's off screen. It is Electric Ladyland. Now, this was the landmark double album from Jimi Hendrix. It was released on, I think 68 was when this came out, and it was the 3rd and final studio album under the Jimi Hendrix experience. Now, Hendrix did some cool things here. Hendrix used multi-tracking, tape manipulation, and spatial effects. after the music, like during the studio process. So what he actually did was take the studio and actually built it into the creative process of the music, which I think is really cool. This cover is a UK cover. Now, this cover was taken by a popular photographer, and it was supposed to showcase the sexual revolution and counterculture of the time. But they did it and published it and released it in the UK without Hendrix ever knowing about it, and he completely disapproved. He hated it. He thought that the cover was a distraction from his own art of the music itself. He didn't like the women being naked on the cover. So this was a very interesting moment for Hendrix, where eventually he won and got the cover changed back to him, what has his kind of, face on it with the different colors on it. But yeah, this is basically a kind of a rare cover, 1980 Journey press. Why it lasted that long in Europe after Hendrix had a fit and had it changed, I don't know. I don't know the backstory of that part. Maybe somebody watching this video does and can share that in the comments below. The cover itself is kind of VG+, but the record inside is near mint and it looks fantastic. So super excited to add that one to the collection. Okay, moving forward, we have, which to me is their best album. I know that hardcore fans are gonna debate me on this, but it's Aerosmith Rocks. Now, some are gonna say Toys in the Attic and other albums. I get it. This is probably my favorite. I think I enjoyed this one the most. This is regarded, though, as one of the greatest hard rock albums of all time. It touches on rebellion, love, chaos, and excess, just like any good rock album would. The cool thing about this, man, you have the opening track, Back in the Saddle, and it's just an explosive opener, right? Which really became hard rock's anthem at the time. Now, this particular press is another simply vinyl press. It is a 98 reissue and it's sealed. So super excited to be able to give that one a spin because, as I just told you, it is probably, to me, one of my favorite Aerosmith albums of all time. Now, this next one I kind of grabbed just because, I don't know, sometimes you grab things that not necessarily what you're looking for, but they just kind of catch your attention. And this is something that I normally don't buy, but it was something I kept going back to. I originally picked it up, I put it back, I picked it up again, I put it back, and on the way out, before I went to the counter, I went and grabbed it again. I don't know why. I did all of that because I normally don't buy these types of records, but it is an interview with Joni Mitchell. Now, this interview was recorded for Musician Magazine, and it's sort of made up with these partial tracks of the album Dog Eat Dog. And what happens here is that in between the tracks, Joni will share, about the song. She'll share a little bit about what's going on in her life at the time, and she'll talk about some societal issues. This is a 85 promo edition made for radio stations. So you have a bunch of stuff in the back of here about how I guess you're supposed to introduce this if you're going to play it. You're supposed to fill in the blank of what studio, city, etc. So I just thought it was cool. To me, this is a little bit of history, and I think that's why I grabbed it, because it's capturing Joni and her where she's at in life in 1985. Just after putting together Dog Eat Dog. I don't know. I think the only other one I have like this is a Bob Marley one. And I love Bob Marley. I think I listened to it once, but it was just something fun for me to have. And I think the reason why I was in that mode is because I picked up this. This is Joni Mitchell. This is Court and Spark. This is when she kind of transitioned from folk going into pop, jazz, and rock. Really two, breakout songs here, Help Me and Free Man in Paris, I think are the two. This album really came out, I think, number 2 on the Billboard 200, certified platinum in the US. Man, this is one of the greatest albums of all time as far as Rolling Stones is concerned. Now, why I was excited about this particular one is that this one is the 2009 reissue mastered by Chris Bellman and cut from the original master tapes. It's supposed to sound really good. So that's why I was excited to grab this one. I didn't have the Chris Bellman cut on this, and I wanted to add it to the collection. Okay, moving forward, you got, this one has a little fun to it. It's a little bit, there's a mystery to this one. This is Prisoner of Love, James Brown. This is when he went for a more polished sound. It's the first album that included strings and a full orchestra. The title track became a standout hit, reaching, I think, 18 on the Billboard Hot 106 on the R&B charts. You got some killer songs on here. You also have Signed, Sealed, and Deliver, Waiting in Vain. I mean, this is just a great sounding record. I think what's cool about it is that it's sealed, but we don't know what year because it's sealed. And I have no idea. I have no idea what pressing this is. So I'm hoping that ends up being a good sounding pressing, because when you listen to James Brown, man, you want to hear James Brown. I don't want to hear a bunch of noise. So I'm hoping this is going to be a decent pressing. I do got to say, I got a little bit low expectations because it's a very cheap record. However, I am hopeful that it sounds good. And who doesn't like James Brown, man? It's such a cool person. And speaking of Brown, how about this guy? This guy was top of his game at the time, and then ended up getting a lot of news media started really hit him, and I think kind of buried his reputation. But how about Bobby Brown? Now, this is his third studio album, self-titled, has some breakout hits here. You got Humpin' Around and Good Enough. They came out as singles. I think Humpin' Around reached 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and Good Enough reaching number 7. This particular pressing is the first press. It is the original pressing, near mint all the way around, studio cut in the US. So yeah, I'm excited to have this because it has some great tracks on it. And sometimes, like I said, you have to separate the artists from the news, and you know, the music here. I remember hearing these songs in the 90s. So yeah, to me, that's an album you just gotta have. Okay, for the Cars fans, you'll like this one. This is Door to Door. This was their 6th and final studio album. Came out with 2 breakout singles on this record. You have You Are the Girl and Strap Me In. When this came out, it kind of had mixed reviews, though. Although it landed, I think, 28 on the Billboard 200, had mixed reviews. I think the band was going through a lot of. I'm pretty certain they broke up almost immediately after this album came out. So I think some of that just kind of spilt into this album, and I think the fans and the listeners kind of felt it. This is a '87 club edition. It is a repress, and it's sealed. So that's why I grabbed it. Figured, you know, why not, man? I like the Cars, and I got to be honest with you, I didn't have Door to Door in my collection. So when I saw sort of the '87 reissue sealed, figured why not? It was a good price. Okay, this next one's a little fun. This has a fun story. So this is a good one to wrap up with. This is going to be the last record I'm sharing with you. This is Little Richard, and this is Southern Child. And if you haven't heard this album, it's okay. We're going to talk about that here in a moment. This was originally recorded in 1972, and this was intended to showcase a new side of Little Richard, sort of blending in country with these funk grooves. Now, why I say there's a story behind this and why I say you might not heard it is because while it was recorded in 1972, the record company ended up shelving it. They shelved it for decades and didn't release it. They didn't come out with it until 2005. And it came out as part of like a Little Richard archival release. So all this effort, all this time went into this and never came out until decades later. Now, this isn't the 2005 release. This is the 2020 Record Store Day pressed on yellow vinyl release, which is supposed to sound pretty good. I got to be honest with you, I've never heard this album, but I like Little Richard, so I'm excited to actually get this on the table and hear the difference because, like I said, it's supposed to be a new sound for Little Richard, and I'm kind of curious to see where it's going. So this is a little something new for me. Okay, folks, that wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed this little tour of Banana Records and going through some of the albums that I picked up. If you have any information about the warehouse at Banana Records, I really hope that you share it in the comments below because I'm trying to make up my mind if I want to go back and check out the warehouse or not. So if it's really worth it, if that's definitely should be a must on my list, let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like videos like this, hit the like button so I know what kind of content you enjoy. And while you leave a comment and hit the like button, I will get ready to see you on the next video.